pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
President Warner?
Here.
Secretary Treasurer Horowitz?
Here.
Trustee Pell?
Present.
Trustee Stafford?
Here.
Trustee Welker?
Here.
Sir, we have a quorum present this afternoon.
All right, thank you very much. At this time, we're going to go into executive session. I'd like to recommend that.
For the purposes of,
Litigation.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Folks, we're going to be in executive session. You're going to have to leave the room until we're done discussing the topic at hand, please. At that time, we'll call you back in. We're officially back in session.
One place that has like a couple of doors of that.
I'd like to, the next thing on the agenda is the minutes, the regular meeting, November 18th, 2019. I'd like to get those minutes accepted. I need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Audience has grown.
Yep. With Mike.
Get it.
I think you have to, right?
Do you want to take this out of?
Yeah, we should do
Order.
this one definitely first.
and you
want-
have to call public portion.
Yeah.
Want to go up and get it?
Yes,
I
please.
think you should get Mike.
Yes.
We should take the round in first.
Yes.
Trying to set these up in a way that everybody can see them, including you.
Thank you.
Put it right in front of James.
The chief building inspector, Mike Bendicasa, has been asked to address the board at this meeting, so he asked if he could come in before we get the meeting formally underway. So we're going to put off the public portion until Mike addresses the board and the public about Round Dune and the issues that are going on in that area.
Hey, we can do some permits then? We could do one.
Yeah, go ahead, Scott.
See, I have 2019-380. It's the town and the trustees, actually, as part is the town parks for 33 Bay Avenue, East Quogue. It's the East Quogue Marine Park. The board did get an email. We all got an email from Kristen Doulos, the park superintendent, with a request to issue the renewal as it was expiring, because it's a commercial recreational area, and for the ease of maintenance of the boats and the facility, she felt that it would be better to stick with the original buffer that was listed in the original permit for sand or stone, which I think is acceptable if we renewed it twice like that. So if there's anything that you want to discuss, I mean, I would be inclined to put forth the renewal as it was, but absent of of the native vegetation for that area. I think she would, talk about doing some native vegetation someplace on the property where it was appropriate, but for the area we're talking about, because of the need for maintenance and the nature of that facility, she wants to go with the standard buffer language that was listed in the original application. So I would like to make a motion that we issue it as it was expiring with the,
So a motion to amend to remove the language in the special condition?
correct. I'd like to make the motion to get rid of the special wording that's in this resolution and renew this as originally issued.
I'll second that. Is everybody okay with that?
Thanks.
Being that it's a park and it's a recreational area?
You vote on it.
At this point, there's no walkway along there, right?
No.
It's
There's just a bulkhead and
Just
there's
a bulk-
grass right up
yeah.
to the bulkhead.
Yeah, it's just natural
And they-
grass that grew there. It's
and
not
they-
sod.
They didn't apply for a walkway along?
No.
No.
Nope. It's a parks facility, and it transitions into a road end with the bulkhead that's going to have to be replaced. Then it further transitions into the Trustee Pier area. And this area is heavily used for commercial use, for loading and unloading vehicles, machinery, and materials that are needed to do projects along the shoreline. I think that it's a good project. This is not new, this is a renewal. And I think a sand or stone buffer for this area is more practical for what is needed. It does get overwashed quite a bit there. And you want something that's going to be able to take that overwash. But I'm sure the Parks Department would be agreeable to work with the trustees, on, other aspects after the project's done, and figure out what makes sense to do there. But for this area, they want to go with the standard buffer.
When are they planning to start work on this?
Well, if you recall, this is a project that we were trying to do, the trustees and the highway department and the parks, to save money for the taxpayer, to do it holistically in one shot, because the pier and the ramp is ours. The part that connects the park and that pier is a town road end. The bulkhead is the old style bulkhead. It is badly deteriorating, and it's an area where you're getting sinkholes and they keep having to fill it in, and this is where kids are snapper fishing and they're crabbing, and there's a lot of people there. Which is why it would probably be better sand or stone, because you don't want the kids climbing through vegetation that may have ticks and whatnot. And I think that, based on this site location, I think it's fully acceptable, and I think it makes more sense practically to do it as the standard buffer language as we initially issued this permit with it. It's just better, more practical.
We, though, have been working towards more stringent buffer language and more stringent buffers, and I thoroughly think that the town should be leading by example in situations like this, and for them to have lawn right up to the bulkhead goes in the face of everything that we're trying to.
Well, it's not really lawn. This is just grasses that have happened to grow there, and they just maintain it as such. It's not that they planted sod or they planted any ornamentals. It's just grasses that have naturally grown there, and they've actually held that together quite well, and they have sustained much overtopping. And I think that you want to do things in applications where it's practical. They're not going to be fertilizing it. They're just going to maintain it as an area. It's still going to be a buffer. It's still going to prevent sheet runoff from coming off of that property and getting into the waterway. But I just think we issued it with the standard buffer language. We renewed it with the standard buffer language, and now here we are, making it harder for the Parks Department to do what it's got to do to provide a facility. It's still a good buffer, and I'm sure that they would be more than happy to work with us on other areas, perhaps that would make sense. But I don't think it should be part of this application.
Would it be possible just to table it for one meeting to talk a bit further with Kristen Doulos to see if something could be worked out?
Well, I think Kristen sent the board an email expressing
Yes.
her views, and I think we should vote on it. I think we should vote on it, and
I think it's important to realize that we have a launching ramp and a town facility, and basically people are going to traverse back and forth on the edge of the water, either go snapper fishing, jump in the water to go swimming, or just to walk back and forth from the marina to the launching ramp. And to keep it somewhat manicured and put stones there would be a good idea. I wouldn't want my kids or as an adult walking through any grass that was higher than a couple inches with the ticks and all the other bugs that are in the area. So, I mean, I can relate to Lyme's disease because I've had issues with it in my family for decades. So I think just as a practical reason, keeping it, with a stone and a sand buffer all along there for the uses for a park, for uses for fishing, and for traversing back and forth to the launching ramp, I think it would be good. But I think also to do a project maybe on the upland where you can put some grasses and some substitute planting to take up some of the stuff that is upland would be a good alternative to
And I'm
this.
sure they'd be agreeable to work on something like that, but relative to this application, I think we need to do what was practical, what we did at the onset, what we renewed, and, it segues, like you said, into our pier, into our ramp, into a town road end. I think it's a practical repair of a badly deteriorated bulkhead with a buffer in an area where, children can go crabbing and snapper fishing, and we would want to see that. We wouldn't want to hinder that.
So if we approve the renewal at this point, but then follow up
Yeah, we could do that.
with
That makes more sense.
discussion,
Absolutely, that makes more sense, but let's not jam them up.
well, trying to look at the big picture and hoping that they would see the validity in what we're doing or what we're encouraging with the buffer.
But there has to be practicality in the area that you're placing a buffer. People still have to be able to maintain the bulkhead and maintain use and get to their boats and be able to enjoy the waterfront without the risk of perhaps, like
So I'm
Trustee Warner was
thinking-
saying.
I'm thinking about Conscience Point as an example. There's a boardwalk along there, and then there's a buffer behind. And I think that in light of that, this could mimic that situation, so
But
perhaps that could
they're not asking for a boardwalk. I think that they're very tight on their budget, which is another issue. The Parks Department is very tight on the budget for this. Having a sand or stone buffer is obviously easier to maintain than a boardwalk, and it would provide actually a better buffer. And I think that, we're mindful of the taxpayer, we're mindful of the environment with a proper buffer, we're mindful of the practicality. I think the way it was initially designed and renewed, I think if it was renewed the same way, I think it makes sense, and I think that we take the pressure off, there's no reason for it, and then we could have conversations, maybe one of the other organizations wants to get involved, maybe Cornell wants to get involved and do a little project there.
So
But I don't think we should
renewal.
hinder this application in a project that's been a long time coming. The community has been asking for this area to
So
be
renew it
fixed.
as it stands now, and then will you work with me to see what we can do?
Yeah, I will
moving
absolutely
forward.
work with you, but I think we need to, like I said, amend the language back to the initially issued application, and then we'll work with them on something outside of this.
Okay.
I'd be more than happy to, but for this, I think it's practical.
Scott,
to
do they
do.
have a date where they're gonna actually start to do the work?
They don't have a date, because if you recall, we were working on trying to do the pier and do the road end all in one shot. And I met down there with the supervisor and with the town comptroller, because we've secured our side of the financing for this on the bonding side. That was one of the agreements that we made with the town, that they would bond for us and then we would pay the debt service because the bulkhead's in bad shape. And when we all met down there, we collectively decided that we had to wait. But now, they have to renew the permits, and I think it makes more sense for us to renew the permits as we initially planned the project, because the budgets are set, and it's a good project, and the community really needs it and wants it. I think we should stay the course, and then as we get moving through, we can certainly work with the park superintendent. She's they try and do nice projects, and they're very green when they can be green, and so are the trustees, but I think you need to be practical, and you also need to be mindful of the budgetary side of this, and I think we can protect it, we can be practical, we can use the facility, we can all work together, but I don't think holding them hostage over this application is the right thing to do.
So if they have no start date, so it's no great rush to get this, have this renewed. In the meantime, they can come up with a green solution along the bulkhead.
Well, their solution was to salt the sand or stone. There's an email that you got, that
Yes.
we all got. And I, based on the fact we issued it that way and renewed it that way, James, you know how many times we renewed this application?
I think it's the second, right?
Second.
Say it on
Right, so
Says
we've,
first.
there. It's first.
but I think it's the second, right?
It'd be the original, and then this would be the first renewal, which would be the second.
Look, you know what, we had a discussion, I know our environmental analyst reached out to the park superintendent, she sent an email back to the board. It's got a buffer, the board made a decision 2 times on this application. So I think it's, a good application, I think it's a good project, I think the community has been a long time coming, wanting to see this get fixed, and I just don't wanna,
It's consistent with what we have done in the past.
it is consistent.
And it is a parks facility, it's not a single residence property where a 4-foot boardwalk to a dock would be accommodating. You're gonna get a lot more use from the public on that waterfront. So I think it would be practical for us to allow the sand or the stones, which would be the best, application there.
Okay.
So
I just-
I recommend that it be approved, so.
Okay. If we could just follow up with the superintendent then, down the road?
Yes.
And see what can be done.
Right, so can we vote on this?
We have a motion and a second to amend. You just need a vote.
All
All in favor?
I'm in favor.
Just as for the amendment, to
Yes.
remove the language.
Yes.
I'm in favor.
I second him.
Do you want me to call the roll?
Yeah, call the roll, please.
President Warner?
Yes.
Secretary Treasurer Horowitz?
Yes.
Trustee Pell?
Yes.
Trustee Stafford?
Yes.
Trustee Welker?
Yes.
It is unanimous, and so now we need a motion to adopt.
Okay, I make a motion to adopt.
I'll second that as the original permit was needed. All in favor? Aye. Thank you. Now, we have Mike Benacasa, who'd like to address our board, the chief building inspector.
This is on, the 2019-382, it's the Round Dune Inc. 101 Dune Road East Quad application.
Good afternoon, Mike Benacasa, Chief Building Inspector, also floodplain manager for the town of Southampton, which I'm charged with administering the FEMA requirements, flood zone building requirements. I was asked to take a look at the Round Dune property in East Quogue, which I did, and I found that the buildings, and I sent an email to the effect that the building, 2 buildings are in imminent danger of collapse if they're not protected over the winter. And the reason why I said that is because the water is slapping up against the pilings at times. The buildings were built in the early 60s, I think it was actually 1960, and we have no information on the depth of the piles. The FEMA regulations are basically to protect building structures, and that's what I'm charged with. So I'm here today to be an advocate for the protection of those buildings with the plan that I was sent from, I think it was First Coastal. I reviewed the plan, and it looks like it was the minimum required to do that. It was up against the piles, the sandbags, and I know there's a feeling in a town, and it has been for a long time, that shore hardening structures aren't a good thing. And as the floodplain manager, I don't get into that. I get into, is this project going to protect the buildings, and I think they will do that. For me, it's always been a struggle because I was a bayman at one time, and I was a builder, and I have been a building inspector. I'm a homeowner on Fire Island over in the Brookhaven town. So I've seen what storms do to structures, and I've watched, it's called a Halloween storm, and I think it was in '95, where 3 houses went down in my community over there. And just watching over the course of like an hour and a half, 2 hours, 3 houses that were standing in the morning and late morning were into the surf. It was, and the homeowners are standing there like, in tears. So it's always been a struggle for me to, once I became a town official, to let things like that happen. And when I saw the 2 structures over there last week, I felt impelled to send that email, and we really need to do something. I did speak to Carl Collins, who's the Coastal Erosion Hazard Administrator. He concurs that the buildings really need to be protected. We both feel that there was a question came about plovers over, coming into the summer months. Leave the bags in place. There's no, dire need to take them out, and Kyle and I both concur, just leave them there, cover them up with sand, and if they're exposed, then, if they get to the point where they're exposed, then cover them up again. They're up against the building, not out in the middle of the beach where it's going to impede cars or trucks going up and down the beach. We both feel it really needs to be done. And I offered to come down today to express, my thoughts on it and answer any questions that you folks might have.
Mike, they've been doing, basically sand replenishment there for several years. If they were to continue the sand replenishment in lieu of using the, geocubes, would that be an adequate way to assure that the pilings would be structurally sound?
Well, until a storm comes. Now, it's hard to say whether, a storm could come and go, maybe sometimes build the beach. You don't know. So sand's great until, waves start slapping up against it and washes it away. The bags hold sand and they just protect the structure. They're sandbags. In my community, they built a whole engineered dune system out of them. And they're exposed now because of the recent storms, and their plans to, the Army Corps is going to come back down and cover them up again. But, it's sand. So, answer to your question, sand's great until the waves come up and wash it away. Okay, other questions?
No, I got one more.
Okay.
See, the intent, I understand. You think we should act today and not wait?
Absolutely.
Now, you do know the geocube is going to cause damage to the property to the east or the west of this, or north and south.
I'm not a coastal geologist,
Okay.
but just looking at that beach, it's straight. So it's not, I would say if they were sticking out into the beach a little bit more, yeah, maybe, but sitting up against the piles on the house, I don't think they're really going to affect the properties to either side.
Okay.
Like, they got some sandbags there now, right? What do you think the effectiveness of those sandbags that they put there now as a temporary measure? Do you think that they're...
I wasn't down there in the last few days, so I haven't seen those. Were they the small guys? The
Yeah,
small-
like the 50 or 100 pound little bags.
With sand
It-
fencing.
With sand fencing also?
Again, if you put enough of those, it'll work, but you need to do something.
Did you issue any permits for geocubes after Sandy?
I don't. The Coastal Erosion Hazard Administrator does, Kyle Collins.
Okay.
My department does process those permits,
Okay.
and then they go to Kyle for signature. Yes, after Sandy, I believe the DEC gave all sorts of emergency permits, and we followed suit.
Okay. So we could get a list of these properties that they were utilized on, and I'm assuming they're still there today?
Yes.
Okay. Thanks, Mike.
Anybody else have any questions for Mr. Benincasa?
Well, it's-
If that's the case, I thank you for coming with your
Thank
expertise.
you. Thank you, Mike.
Thank you for your service.
Do you want to continue this?
I think we should continue this.
All right, let's take I'd like to take out of order I need a second on.
I'll second it.
All in favor, we'll take this particular application out of order so that we can address it
Okay,
at this
so
time.
Are we calling a vote on that?
2019-382, page
2019,
3.
Yes.
All in favor for
Aye.
taking, aye?
For
Taking it,
taking it out of order?
yes.
Yeah.
Second. I
All
don't
in
know where
favor?
we are.
Aye.
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 All right.
Yes.
So I have an application, 101 Dune Road, East Quad, the Round Dune, and I think Aaron Tertunian is the agent for the applicant, and maybe he has some more information for us here today.
Thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. My name is Aram Tertunian, First Coastal Corporation, West Hampton Beach, on behalf of the applicant. I have with me this afternoon Ms. Karen Hogue from Toomey Latham, my business partner Bill Mack, Seth Allen from Chesterfield Associates, Paul DeLandro from DeLandro Andrews Engineers, and the Vice President of the Round Dune, Mr. and Mrs. Ross. You very graciously put us on your agenda last Wednesday, where we had a preliminary conversation, and as a result of that, we were asked to undertake some investigations over the holiday, which we did, and I'm going to give you a bunch of paper, which we created. So I'll just start with that and give that to Lisa, I guess.
Okay, thank you.
And so let's just briefly review.
Yeah, is this for the board? Yeah. Okay.
So just briefly review the site, right here, this one, right here. That's it. The site conditions here, this is a 2018 aerial photograph.
Okay.
And we've drawn on here two red lines. One shows the crest of the dune in 2018, approximately March. And the second one shows the crest of the dune as it existed a couple of months ago. It's actually now under the building itself. That change in the dune is approximately...
Aaron, can you show that to the public in the audience?
Yeah,
so that they-
absolutely.
Lisa, can I borrow the one that you have?
I don't have one.
Oh, okay.
I have to share with Scott.
No problem. I'm used to being chopped liver.
I have to share with Trustee Horowitz.
Thank you.
So this is the change that occurred. A lot of this change occurred in the initial storm, which was October 10th to the 12th, and there's been additional damage since that date. So I've given you out a syllabus of what I plan to present this afternoon, and so just starting with the site conditions, we've lost approximately 50 feet of dune within the last 30 days, most of it in one storm. As you heard from Mr. Benacasa, the piles are now exposed and potentially being undermined. The building was constructed in 1960. We don't have any plans whatsoever on the foundation. The burial depths are therefore unknown, and this is a critical factor. For your reference, a modern FEMA foundation, the bottom of the pile goes to negative 10 feet sea level, and that's to ensure that the building can survive wave impact. These piles, we have no idea. They could be down 2 feet, 20 feet, a half a foot, we don't know. The condition of the piles is deteriorating. You'll hear some evidence later on from a professional engineer. And as everybody knows, we're only in the beginning of the nor'easter season, which is going to extend all the way into June. So what have we done to date? It's important to understand the Round Dune has not been idle. They immediately took steps to bring in sand to shore up the foundation. This is under permit. They have a permit both from this board and from the town of Southampton and from the DEC to place sand and to place sandbags. And they did that. They brought in sand. It was, of course, expensive. They did place some 80-pound sandbags, and they put up some sand fencing. The board saw these photos last week, just to give you an overview, of what it looked like. Those photos were taken, those aerials were taken about the middle of October. This is a repeat. This is what it looked like this morning. So you can see, this is about at mid-tide. This is about at 8:30, 9 o'clock this morning. High tide's about 11:15, 11:30. And these are these 80-pound sandbags that we talked about, the sand fencing and the sand that's been placed behind it. And this is a drone photo that we took yesterday, and you can see that they're both painted. So these are the conditions. Now, when I was there yesterday afternoon at about 3 o'clock, and the beach extended all the way past the deck, that sun deck, which at one time was at the dune line, is now, today, in the surf zone. Yesterday, it was 64 feet from the toe of the dune. So we had a small cold front go through, and you are looking at an excess of 60 feet of change on this beach. If we have any type of storm, you're going to see 100 or more feet of change. And that's what we're worried about. So,
Yeah.
just to summarize, Round Dune has not been idle. They have exercised the permits that they possess to the full extent. These measures are insufficient.
Harold, if I could just, one question on the last set of photos, you don't need to put them back up for me to see. The photo that was taken yesterday, that was taken at low tide, the drone photo?
It was taken at, I think, 2 o'clock, so that was low tide.
Thank you, just for the record.
Thank you. So what are we asking for? What we are asking for is a geocube cored sand dune. This is something that has been done to speak to President Warner's question. There are 10 separate properties in the town of Southampton and the village of Sagaponack that were issued permits after Sandy for cube cored sand dunes. There's another about a dozen in the village of Quogue that have the same permits, all issued by the respective jurisdictions.
But not by the trustees, correct?
I believe that the trustees did issue a blanket letter. I'm having a problem finding it in my files, but there was some type of something issued. I don't remember what it was.
I don't remember. After Sandy, I don't believe there was.
I don't
Okay.
believe they did either, but I just...
All right. I have not been able to locate whatever it is I have.
Okay.
So what we're asking you to approve is a cube cored sand dune placed as far landward as possible against the foundation of the building. And as a result of discussions, I know concerns that were raised by this board and also concerns that were raised by the DEC, which I'll get into in a minute, to relocate the existing deck where it is out on the beach landward of the crest of the dune. So that will free up some of the issues about public access. So the major change that you're seeing here
Thank you.
So the major change you're seeing on this plan that you didn't see last week is the relocation of the existing sun deck landward of the crest of the dune.
Now, is that the deck that's in the water right now?
That's correct.
That's gonna be taken down?
That's going to be taken down. As long as we can get to it. On Sunday we could, and on Monday we can't. So, and I'm handing out reduced size plans of what I just showed you in the larger image. So just to understand what this is, a geocube is a 3 foot by 3 foot by 3 foot geosynthetic. And one of the things, there's a couple of things that make this different than a quote sandbag. The number one thing is that the materials themselves are designed to be resistant to wave impact and abrasion by the sand. Number two, which is really critical, is that all of these cubes can be interlocked. In other words, they have hooks on all corners, and we literally tie all of the cubes together. So when a wave hits it, it's not hitting the one single 1.25 ton cube, which contains 1 cubic yards of sand. It's hitting all the cubes. They're absorbing all the energy. And this is a critical difference when looking at what will actually function on the site. Because even if you put in 10,000 80-pound sandbags, they're not interconnected. And so it's just 80 pounds resisting the ocean waves. It simply doesn't work. In fact, in 2007, they were issued a permit and they did that, and they just became beach litter. So it's really not a feasible method to use 80-pound units that aren't interconnected. What we have are basically building blocks that are all interconnected, and this is a critical design feature that no other alternative offers us. So what alternatives did we consider? All right, well, we considered sand alone. In fact, since 2007, Round Dune has placed in excess of 10,000 cubic yards of sand on 350 feet of beach. They have spent in excess of $323,000 in that 12-year period of time, and the erosion has only gotten worse. So sand alone is not a feasible option. In fact, is demonstrably has failed at this site. And that is in line with basic engineering and coastal geology. You cannot protect such a narrow piece of beach, 350-foot wide piece of beach, by merely placing sand. Sand nourishment projects are usually 1 to 2 miles long and involve between 80 and 100 cubic yards of sand per foot of beach. So sand alone, trucked in and placed here, will not work. We were asked to examine reinforcing the existing piles. Can't you just go in and drive new piles next to the old ones, called sistering them up, and bolt them all together? So we had Paul DeLandro from DeLandro Engineering do an evaluation. This is one of the things that the President requested. And I'm giving you up his report, and I will let him summarize it for you.
Hi, as mentioned, I'm Paul DeLandro from DeLandro Andrews Engineering. DeLandro Andrews completes civil and structural engineering for both residences and commercial structures, licensed in the state of New York. Upon completing the inspection, as mentioned previously, the structures are in imminent peril. Would a storm come by and those piles be further undermined, there's a great likelihood of collapse. Largely based on the uncertainty of any information on the existing conditions. We don't know the depths of the piles. If we were to lose another 18 feet of sand under that structure, they could all just topple over. Additionally, the condition of the piles is that they are deteriorating. There's evidence that, since being installed in the 1960s, they're wood piles. They are slowly deteriorating. A combination of the greater exposure and deterioration just furthers the case that if nothing is done, the structure will collapse. In addition to that, the only pile structure that could be installed under the structure, as is a helical pile. That will not give us the ability to brace for flood loading without excavating and undermining what's there and installing steel bracing, which isn't feasible. We can't endanger what's currently in place to install something it doesn't work out. Wood piles would be an option, but the only way to install them would be relocating the structure, excavating down to about zero, installing the piles, wood bracing, and then placing the structures back on top of them, which we would likely the structures would be gone before we had time to complete a project of that extent. Also, it would also further the erosion with such a vast excavation and scope of work within the near time frame. That basically sums up the structural intent of it. Do you have any questions regarding the structural intent or other options that were considered in reinforcing?
I'd just like to clarify a point. You said the pilings are deteriorating, is that correct?
That is correct.
So that means that the neglect on the part of the homeowner, property owner, is how that situation has come apart. It's nothing in terms of the length of the beach or anything that's eroded. That's something that the property owner has not taken care of, correct?
With respect to coating the piles? or-
Deterioration of the pilings. You're talking about the fact that they're deteriorating, and you're adding a certain element of concern because of that condition, and I just want clarification, whose responsibility to take care of those pilings?
Yeah, absolutely. That being said, because it's so close to the water, using pressure-treated materials to further the lifespan is, prohibitive. Additionally, though, the deterioration itself is not the direct cause of failure. Even if the piles were brand new, a year or two ago, they're not designed to handle the stresses that would be created.
Agreed, but the lack of the condition being pristine, shall we say, would contribute to the ease of that structure collapsing even further, correct?
Correct,
Okay,
but
thank
not,
you. Just wanted to see
Yeah, it's not making things better.
the relative parts of this component and your answers, that's all. Thank you.
If this structure was to be built today with the similar pilings and cross bracing, would it conform to the building codes that we have in the town now, and engineering wise?
It would have to.
I mean, as it exists right now,
We don't know the answer to that, because we don't know the information on the depth of the piles that were installed
Okay.
and the methods of the installation.
How did you find out?
How would you, you'd have to basically dig up the piles
And that's only what?
to find out the depth, to verify it, yeah, yes. And even if you did dig up, you couldn't dig up just one pile to certify the depth of the piles. You'd have to do multiple. It's possible you could try and do some type of, they do use sonar to monitor the ground and see what's going on, but I don't believe it's been used in applications such as that. Would also be, I think the value of the information would be questionable, and additionally, even if they were installed at 20 feet deep, the grade that's there is probably about 18 feet above where they need to be, so they would have to be installed at least 10 feet below that. So we're talking about 30-foot piles just to the top of the sand, let alone extending up to the top of the building. Given the diameter of the butts on the piles, that would be rare that they would come in such an excessive length that they would be adequate to support that structure.
Any other questions for Mr. DeLandro?
When this structure was originally built in 1960, this format that you use with the pilings and the cross bracing was made so that you could wash out and then put the sand back underneath there.
If we were to design it today
Yeah.
to support that, it would be designed and built with that intent.
Okay.
Being that it was built in the 1960s, I'm not certain that that was the case.
Okay.
And if you look at, partially because when you look at the FEMA flood map, you'll notice that that lot is only partially within the FEMA flood zone of VE 18. I think at that time the FEMA flood maps weren't what they are today. So a lot of times on other buildings we've done structural renovations on, research, and they were not necessarily installed to the same standards that we would expect to be installed to today, which leads to the uncertainty of that. If all the sand, obviously you could have problems there, or will have problems.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And we also, there's not just an engineering component to this, but there's a practicality to using piles to support the structure. So I asked Seth Allen from Chesterfield Associates to review the site and to offer his opinion to the board. Chesterfield Associates is recognized as the preeminent marine and coastal contractor in our area. They work all over the state and probably all over several states. And Seth himself has been doing this for, probably 35 or 40 years. So Seth, could you come up here for a second, please? Seth, I'd just like you to speak to the board about your inspection, what your opinion is, and of course to answer any questions they have.
After looking at the structures, there's really no way to drive any additional piles underneath the structures as to sistering the piles, as Aaron had mentioned before. There's just no way to get the equipment out of there. We did recently, were able to sister up some of the some of the overhead deck piles because they were external piles and they're the ones that were exposed to the ocean. I was able to have a small machine down there and drive 8x8 posts, green heart posts, and get them another 12 or 15 feet below the existing beach grade and bolt those to the piles. But those are only because they were external to the building. Anything underneath the building, there's really no way to drive any piles under there. Without, as Paul had said, moving the buildings off the location, drive all new piles, and then put the buildings back where they are. It's just not feasible. Helical piles was brought up. The problem with helical piles is there's no lateral stability to them. They will support a vertical load very well. We use them all the time. But where it's there's any kind of danger of a washout, to where there's no supported soil around it, they're not laterally stable. So you can support the building, but it won't hold up against any wave action. So I don't see any temporary answer to supporting the existing piles while things are being decided here. And believe me, install a lot of piles, and there's just no way to do it feasibly.
Mr. Allen, have you been involved in moving structures back when they're in danger of?
I've been a part of those projects, yes. We don't physically do the moving, but we work very closely with a lot of the home movers, and then we discuss location of the new pilings, where the new buildings are going to go, and their access to it. So I have been involved quite a bit in projects, moving buildings, yes.
Because it just seems to me that that has to be considered at some point in this process, and I realize that it's a small the lot itself has a small footprint.
It's getting smaller.
Yes, indeed. But I think that needs to be addressed at some point.
Well, that's more Aaron's department than mine, but right now, something like that would take quite some time to engineer, get permits with not only your board, but the health department would have to get involved, the building department, obviously, if something gets moved, there's a possibility it'd have to come up to code, as Ed had mentioned. Well, now we'd have to bring it up to code, fire safety. So all of that takes time. Right now, we don't have the time. By the time all of that was said and done, those structures could easily be gone. I think what we're looking to achieve here is to give the homeowners some time to work out what they're going to eventually do. And I think what Aram has proposed here is probably the most benign, but going to work, in my experience, without a doubt.
You've installed these before?
I haven't. Aram works closely with another contractor that does them, so I have no dog in this race at all because I don't install those bags. So, all being said, I still think that it's a feasible action, and again, there's going to be no money in my pocket if it's approved. Somebody else is going to do it, but I think
it's an
they'll work.
alternative.
Exactly.
Versus the structure going out to sea.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Anything else?
Thanks, Seth.
Thank you.
Thank you, Seth.
Thank you, Mr. Allen. So the next alternative we looked at were rocks, and rocks, as we all know, are prohibited under the town code. The other thing is that they won't really function the way that we need to function. In order for a rock wall to be effective, it has to be a coherent structure, which means we'd have to literally build a rock revetment. And we don't have the time, and we certainly are not going to get the approval to do something like that, which is prohibited. The other thing we were asked to look at was building relocation that Trustee Welker talked about. So I did some investigation here, and I've summarized that in your handout. You'll see that under point 4D. So I think understanding this site and what it would take to do any type of relocation has led me to say that this is a 2-year process. Even if it's feasible, it's a 2-year process. And let me explain why. First of all, you have 2 major approvals you have to get. This is a pre-existing non-conforming use. It's a multifamily structure in a single-family zone, which means anything that gets done here has to go to the Zoning Board of Appeals. So that itself has a whole process. The second major approval is the Health Department. So because these buildings were built prior to the adoption of the Suffolk County Health Code, nobody even knows where the sanitary system is. We believe we know where it is because we've traced a couple of the pipes back and we think they're north of each of these 2 buildings. But we don't know for certain where they are. But I can tell you what I do know for certain is that there are 72 units in this building. And even if they are the smallest unit applicable under the law, it's 125 gallons per day. So everything from 0 to 600 square feet is 125 gallons per day. At 72 units, that's 9,000 gallons per day that we have to accommodate. So it's physically impossible to build enough leaching area to actually accommodate that level of required flow. So what would happen? We'd have to build a packaged sewage treatment plant. You're talking millions of dollars, and you're talking year or 2 in the permit process. And it wouldn't make sense to go to the zoning board to get an approval to relocate the building if we didn't have the health department approval so that they could use the buildings after they were built, after they were relocated. So we would have to go to the health department, and then we'd have to go to the zoning board. We'd have to make a case to the zoning board. we'd have to accommodate not just all of the site plan stuff that's necessary for multifamily, which is going to be parking, it's going to be all kinds of access, and then we have to accommodate the New York State Fire Code, because the building department's not going to approve a structure unless it meets all New York State Fire Code. So this turns into easily $4, $5, $6 million project that takes 2 or 3 years to do. That's my evaluation, having done projects like this over the 35 years I've been practicing. So I would put forth to you, although it is something worthy of consideration, it doesn't fit into an emergency time frame. And I'd leave you with one other thought, which is if you look at the survey of the site, which I have a copy of here. This is the most recent survey. It's done in '07, but buildings haven't moved. There's between, so this is the ocean on the bottom and Dune Road on the top. And the distance between this building in the southeast corner and the pool is about 30 feet. And the distance between both of these buildings is only about 80 feet. So in the best scenario, you might be able to pick up 25 feet on one side. And on the other scenario, you certainly wouldn't want these buildings next to each other. You'd want some separation for light and air. Are you going to pick up maybe 50 feet? Well, quite frankly, we just saw 50 feet disappear in less than 30 days. So is that really practical? Well, we can certainly evaluate it, but I think you're going to spend $4 or $5 million and 2 or 3 years doing it, you should be able to get more than 25 or 30 feet. So what other considerations have we gone about? So it turns out that it helps to be a pack rat, which I admit to readily, since I found these permits from 1997. So in 1997, Round Dune had a significant erosion problem, and they came to this board and to the New York State DEC, and they requested the installation of a geotube.
It's okay.
And both this board and the New York State DEC issued permits in 1997 to build a geotube at this location. And I'm giving you copies of both of those permits. I think a couple of things are important to note here. The first thing is that the condition in 1997 was a whole lot better than it is today. There was 20 or 30 feet of dune between the buildings and the crest, as well as a wider beach. Now we have the eroded scarp under the buildings, and as you saw from this photo from this morning, the water is washing up to the toe of that eroded scarp. So conditions today are far, far, far worse than they were in '97 when this board approved a geotextile solution. The second thing I would point out is that the board wrote a very considered and thoughtful series of special conditions that accompany this permit, and you have them here. And these special conditions speak to precisely the things that the board had asked me to investigate when I presented this last week. Things such as keeping the structure covered, such as ensuring public access, and as you read through it, the laundry list of concerns that have been raised by this board are addressed specifically in this permit issued in November of 1996. I thought it was 7, it's 96. So, and the DEC permit mirrors the trustee permit. So I would submit to you that this board has examined a situation where the conditions were nowhere near as horrific as they are today, and approved a similar type of structure as we're asking for today. And I'll let Ms. Hoag speak to the special conditions.
Hi, good afternoon. Karen Hoag from Toomey Latham. I just wanted to point out some of the conditions that are in this 1996 report include the obligation of the permittee to provide a written report to the trustees on a time basis. I think it's every year by March 15th, where they have to provide a written report detailing the conditions of the area, including the adjacent properties. There is also, as Aram said, the maintenance obligation. There is a provision in here, if you look at paragraph number 4, which is a condition which says that if there's a determination that there's a substantial risk to nearby properties, that the geotubes or geocubes would be removed. There's also the obligation to post a bond and security and as-built surveys showing the current site conditions. So I think that these are conditions that address some of the concerns that have been raised by the trustees, and also conditions that our clients would be willing to also agree to as part of this application. And I think that that should give the trustees the comfort knowing that there is there are written reports, there are photographs, site conditions, we're looking at adjoining properties, to address any potential concerns. It's not something that we're not paying attention to. We have obligations to report to the trustees. Thank you.
Aaron, what happened to the geocubes that were installed under the geotubes, excuse me, let me correct myself. Back in '96, they got the permit. What happened to them?
They never built them.
Okay, thank you.
They filed an application with the Zoning Board of Appeals, and my understanding it was going to be denied, so they withdrew it. But that's all on the GIS system. You can read that.
Thank you, I will.
Okay, continuing forward, some other additional considerations. We shared our plan with the DEC last week during the time we were speaking to you. They were reviewing it as well, and I received this email communication from the DEC, and you can read it for yourself, but just to summarize it, I asked them, should I make an emergency application? I'm prepared to do this right away. And the response was, don't do an emergency application. It's only good for 30 days. File this permit, move the sun deck from the beach landward to the landward crest of the dune. File this, and we'll give it an expedited review and approval. So you have the documentation in front of you from Sue Ackerman, who's the regional permit administrator, saying, send it.
One more. Got it?
An additional question that was asked had to do with erosion on adjacent properties. So I think there's two things to understand with regard to that. Number one, erosion is occurring on this entire stretch of beach. Erosion will continue to occur on this entire stretch of beach. There is a natural element to how much erosion is going to occur. So will the areas on either side of this property erode? Yes, they will erode. And they will erode primarily as a result of the natural erosion that this entire shoreline is facing. That's a very important point to understand. Now, is there a potential, if these geocubes are subject to sustained wave attack, that they will increase the erosion on the adjacent properties? I would say two things to that. Number one, if you go to the Quogue Village Beach, where there's been an installation since 2011, and it stretches east and west for at least 500 or 600 feet, there is no additional erosion east and west of those geocubes. Go and look at it yourself. It's there, okay? That's number one. Number two, the applicant is proposing to put 2,500 cubic yards of sand into and on top of the structure, which will erode away sacrificially and supply sand to the adjacent shorelines. So I think as far as mitigation goes, as far as the process goes, there's a natural process where erosion is going to occur. Number two, experience shows us, go to the village of Quogue where there's over 1,000 feet of this, it does not increase the erosion east and west. And number three, we're including mitigative measures, which, by the way, match the mitigation measures that this board required when they approved that geotube in 1997. The next item is public access, and I think that public access, that the conditions that this board approved in 97 speak to public access. I think the fact that we're removing the sun deck from the beach speaks to public access. If you go to a non-storm condition, yesterday at 3 o'clock in the afternoon, there was 60 feet of high tide beach. I drove back and forth across this, and there were dozens of other tire tracks that did the same thing. And you go to a storm condition this morning, and there's no access for anybody anywhere because the water's up against the dune. So public access will be protected in a non-storm condition under our proposal.
You said that was high, that was low tide in the photo, correct, yesterday?
Yesterday was low tide,
okay.
but there was a berm crest 60 feet wide, flat, and then it sloped 30 feet down to the water. So there was a total of 90 feet, and on the high section, 60 feet wide.
I heard you say there was high tide beach, that's why I just wanted to...
Yeah, high tide was this morning.
Oh, okay.
Thank you. The issue of time frame I didn't discuss in my written comments, and I apologize for that. But I think that the issue of time frame is absolutely fundamental here. We have a patient that is suffering from a knife wound, and now is not the time to discuss their diet. Now is the time to stop them from bleeding, get them healthy, and then discuss their diet. So whereas my client is fully willing and able and prudent, we think, to evaluate other long-term options, it would be specifically foolhardy to ignore the present condition and just study long-term options. So I'd say from a time frame point of view, it's fundamental that we act immediately, and it's fundamental that whatever future action taken, whether it's relocation of the buildings or implementation of the Fire Island to Montauk Point Beach Restoration Plan, that what we're doing now dovetails with that future action. So let's just talk about the FIMP plan for a moment. So last Wednesday, I met with Colonel Asbury from the U.S. Army Corps of Engineers and Joe Seabold, the Deputy District Engineer. And we toured Shinnecock Inlet, where, as you know, there's been an emergency underway for several months. And we're talking about methods that would be undertaken to solve that emergency situation, which are going to be single and separate from the FIMP project. Again, emergency situation at Shinnecock doesn't wait for FIMP to be solved. They're going to solve that in the next few months. But between the town, the county, the state, and the federal government, they're going to get a solution to that. I'm not going to discuss what it is, but the point is they're acting separate and independent from any long-term plan, which is the FIMP plan, which has restoration efforts that would be undertaken at Shinnecock and also efforts that would be undertaken on this stretch of beach. There is a beach restoration program that goes from approximately Road K all the way about 1,500 feet into the Village of Quogue, including the Round Dune property, which will create a 90-foot wide beach berm, a 13-foot high dune, and a seaward slope of 1 on 20. Now, according to Colonel Asbury, that plan is on target for a 2021 construction date, and here's how it all fits together. The plan was submitted from the New York District to the New York Division to the headquarters of the Army Corps in Washington. It is now on the Chief of Engineers' desk. That report has to get what's called a Chief's report, and the Chief's report is due out in April of 2020. After the Chief of Engineers approves that plan, because it's already been funded by Congress, it does not have to go back to Congress. It merely goes to the Assistant Secretary of the Army for Civil Works, Mr. James, and Mr. James can sign the Chief's report, forward it to the division and to the district, and they can begin the project. Now, that will begin a 3-part program. Number 1, there has to be a contract between the federal, state, county, and town governments. It's called a Project Participation Agreement, so-called PPA. That contract will have to be negotiated over the next summer. Then, when that PPA is signed, the Corps will then prepare plans and specifications and put the project out on the street for bid. That is, again, supposed to occur in the summer of 2020. Once the project is out on the street for bid, then the Corps will accept bids, they will award it to the lowest bidder, and the project is then scheduled for construction in 2021. Now, the thing that's markedly different from this particular timeline than any timeline you've ever heard of before on FIMP is that the report is actually in Washington being reviewed by the Chief of Engineers. This has been the big hurdle that has been holding up this project for many, many years. So the fact that the report for Hurricane Sandy relief is on the Chief of Engineers' desk is now really bureaucratic. And we, meaning the town, the county, and the state, all have to work diligently to make sure that that timeline stays, because now there's no reason not to approve the program and move to construction. So that describes the FIMP process. I understand it's Byzantine. I've been doing it, my whole career, and I understand just enough to get by.
Can I just interrupt for 1 sec? Can you just speak a bit to the construction of the proposed sand dune that the Army Corps?
That the Army Corps is going to build?
Yes.
All right, so beach restoration is undertaken by what's called hydraulic filling. So the Army Corps has investigated and found sand sources that are located about a mile offshore, where the grain size of the sand matches the grain size on our beach, which is because it's a relic beach from thousands of years ago, when the ocean level was lower. They then use a hydraulic dredge to suction that material off the seafloor, and they spread that through a pipeline, through a liquefied slurry onto the beach, where the water itself flows away and the sand stays behind. If you want to see an example of this, the county is doing this at Shinnecock Inlet right now, where they're dredging a navigation channel and disposing sand on the beach. And it's also being undertaken at West Hampton Beach at Jetty 4, where the Army Corps is actually in the process of a beach restoration program associated with a different project called the interim project. And once that sand is placed on the beach, then they use heavy moving equipment to shape it into the dune and the beach configuration that's designed for.
So it's similar to what was done between Flying Point Road and Town Line Road?
It's the same process. So as far as timing goes, it's my contention that it would be only prudent to tie these two things together, and to tie whatever long-term action is going to be taken to the short-term action we're using to save the patient. In other words, if the patient has a knife wound, we don't stitch him up and then, regardless of his condition, 6 months later, open him up again. What we do is we watch the patient, we gauge the patient, we make the patient healthier, and when there is a solution that will provide a long-term fix for the area, that we implement that solution in concert with the short-term solution. I think that's only prudence dictates we operate that way. In summary, I would say the geocubes and sand dune application is the most appropriate solution to the immediate condition. It does conform with the town code. The town code only allows the use of geosynthetics for emergency conditions. It doesn't allow any other form. We can't use rocks, we can't use steel, we can't use timber, we can't use plastic. The only thing the town code provides for is geosynthetics.
Are you talking town code?
Town of Southampton, because I have to deal with all jurisdictions.
Understood, but you're here before the town trustees,
yes.
which has a different set of rules.
Yes, they do.
Okay, thank you.
And point B is that what we're asking to do today conforms to what this board approved in '97, that the DEC both approved the '97 solution and has indicated, as you have in writing, that they would approve this plan as amended if we move the sun deck. And you've heard that this is the minimum necessary to protect the foundation. We have included mitigation measures that are consistent with general coastal processes and the board's previous action, and what we're doing will not impede public access. So with that, I would say thank you for hearing me, and please, happy to answer any questions you might have, as will Ms. Hogue. And respectfully, I would ask the board to act immediately in this emergency.
Last Friday, I had a phone call into coastal specialist Robert Young, asking him to look at this proposed plan. He was not able to do that. He's not in the country. We're going to give him a little bit of time to look at this plan and come up with any, ideas, proposals, and thoughts that he has as far as the trustees and our board moving forward on this project. I think it's prudent that we take that look at it at least. Anybody else on the board would like to?
No, not at this point. Actually, yes, one question. So, Aaron, in looking at your plan for geocube placement, you are proposing that the geocubes run the entire 340 feet length of the property. They're not tucked up against the foundation of either building. Instead, they front the property.
Mm-hmm.
So have you considered the possibility of just tucking them up under the foundations of the building?
Yes, we have, and here's why we rejected that. Number one, having two structures with a gap in the middle is like having half a dam. It's not an effective way to protect either structure, because it allows the waves and the tides to erode the sand that's in between them and outflank whatever protection we can provide. That's number one. Number two, we'd have to excavate 4 times as much dune in order to tuck these structures around the building. So if we take a look, aerial photo. If you take a look, we'd have to excavate into the dune 30, 40 feet more than's already been eroded on either side here in order to protect the structure from flanking. Same thing on this side, same thing on this side. Even doing that, you're still going to have a route for erosion to come right through the middle of it. So, prudence dictates that we not build two things that are tucked around the building. We definitely evaluated it, and those are the reasons that we chose this.
Okay. I still think in the big picture, the long-term view on this, we have to look at retreat here. And I understand that's not what you're after right now, but just looking at the aerials, being down there myself this morning at high tide, I don't think there's another option that you and your clients have. I mean, if you've got history back to '97 with asking for geocube placement, this has been something that's been in your sights for an extended period of time. You also have, in excess since 2007, you've been placing sand. So why haven't you ever considered in the past retreat here? That's my question.
Well, I can't look back. First of all, I haven't been their consultant except for about the last 30 days. So I can't explain why something happened. But I can tell you this. If that's something that this board wants us to evaluate as part of their approval, then make it a condition of the permit. But I don't think it's rational, quite frankly, to say that we're going to study this patient's diet and why they haven't improved themselves over X period of time. We're just going to let them die on the table. I don't think that. I think these are two very different questions.
Well, I don't think it's rational to only look at one patient here when you have a full beach.
But that's our process.
Other homeowners.
We can't look for everybody else. We can only look for ourselves. And
Yes,
in fact,
but
the
here's
plan
what-
that's for everybody else is the FIMP plan, and that's been a municipal responsibility since 1960, the year these buildings were built. So I don't think it's fair in any sense to place the responsibility for this shoreline on the backs of 72 homeowners in this condominium. That's distinctly unfair. I appreciate your point of view, and I support it. But I don't think you balance the books on their back.
Well, I have hesitation on, I'm very optimistic that there is perhaps forward motion with FIMP, but we've been waiting a long time. And those are promises at this point. I'd love to see the action follow up those promises. And here's my thing also, we're also looking a couple 100 yards to the east is Dolphin Beach. That's public beach, public access. This is a really vulnerable stretch of Barrier Island. Barrier Island processes are for the Barrier Island to move landward. I don't know.
Over what
It's-
time frame now?
so-
We're talking
so-
human
so-
time frames here,
so
not talking
let-
thousands
let
of
me
years.
Finish, Aaron. So I think as a town, as a community, working with other organizations, we need to start to look at what our plan is. Because I appreciate that you're looking at the micro here, but we as a community need to look at the bigger picture.
Well, I think that we have. The town has a generic environmental impact statement that they wrote, got to be 15 years ago now, that speaks to all of these issues and specifically says, in emergency situations, you can use geosynthetics. That's what it says. I didn't make it, they made it. It also says beach restoration is the way to go. We're trying like heck to get that done. So I think we're making all the right moves. I think we need to work harder on beach restoration, but that doesn't, but this is an emergency. This is not, we don't have time to discuss. It's decide time.
I'd like to take Ann's words a little bit further. You started out in '96. Somewhere along the line, the red flag should have went up, you had a problem in this area. And here it is 20 years later, still dealing with the same problem. I understand you have an emergency. There's no doubt. However, 20 years ago, you had the same emergency, or somebody put a plan together, whether it was you or somebody else, there was still a problem with this area. And it should have been solved then. And here we are, still at the table talking about it.
That's right. Yeah, we are. But I don't know what other conversation to have. I think the conversation of we do nothing and let the buildings fall onto the beach is a bad conversation. I think the conversation of we have to do the best we possibly can, given the hand of cards we've been dealt, I think that's good. That's what's called good management. You deal with what you're dealt. You can't just dream about what you want, and then you work your butt off to get FIMP to come in 2021, just like a whole bunch of us have been doing for a bunch of years. I think that's the way you do it. And I'll tell you, you want to look, beach restoration works. We did it in Sagaponack and Bridgehampton. We did it in West Hampton Dunes. You can do it, doing it on Fire Island. It works, but it takes.
The usual time frame is 3 to 5 years. That we've been lucky with the Watermill to Wainscott stretch.
You weren't
But
lucky. That was done by a private effort. That was a PPP. That was a
Right.
public-private partnership.
Right, but usually, if you read in the research, usually the time frame is 3 to 5 years, right, for beach restoration? The length of time in which it's going to be a viable.
Shelf life.
It's well, no, that's not true. There are some that are 3 to 5 years. There are a lot of others that are 5 to 10. I mean, in Sagaponack, we're in year 6. We still got 90% of the sand.
No, I know it's
Okay.
It's
Yeah.
projections.
So West Hampton Dunes was designed as a 3-year return time. We're in year 5 of the last renourishment. So almost double what was predicted. But that's a wonderful conversation once we get that project. But we have to stay alive between now and then.
Trustee Warner, can I just ask, going back to your comment about getting an engineer to review this, in terms of timing, what do you anticipate?
I have a proposal here for a public hearing on the December 16th. Presently, he's out of the country. I'd like to have some time to, put this out there to the public. The other user groups, Aram, you did a wonderful presentation for the Round Dunes, but this is only one side of the picture that we're seeing. I think the public and the adjoining property owners should have a chance to at least comment during a public hearing process. I think it's that important, being that this will be the first and only structure right now that is a hardening structure from Shinnecock to this point. There are no other structures along there that would be similar to this proposal. So I think it's a big, it's a big project, and it should be viewed that way. And I'd like to get Robert Young, who's been up here. He's walked the beach after Hurricane Sandy. He's looked at many of the trustee beaches and other facilities. He's written reports, and he's familiar with this area. So I'd like to have him take a look at this proposal and see what his thoughts are as far as maybe a short-term and a bigger long-term a proposal, like with the FIMS project, how that's all going to play into this erosion problem that's happening here.
So do you anticipate him having a report by the 16th meeting?
I would like to have him at least review the proposal that's we're looking at right now.
So, President Warner, I respectfully disagree on the following points. Number one, I have asked for, and I ask for again, an immediate decision. I don't think you wait in emergencies for anybody, number one. Number two, Dr. Young is a doctor of geology. He is not an engineer. You have in front of you a report by a professional engineer licensed by the state of New York that tells you these structures are in imminent peril, number one. Number two, I'm a coastal geologist with 35 years experience, and I'm telling you these structures are in imminent peril. Number 3, you have Seth Allen, who's been building structures for probably the last 40 years, probably installed 10,000 pilings in his career, is telling you that these structures are in imminent peril. I would say failure to act at this point places a responsibility on the board, that if there is something that occurs between now and whatever date you decide, whatever that date is, quite frankly, I say that's on you. And if you want to accept that responsibility, then that's your choice. I will respectfully ask you to act on the application we've put in front of you. This is an emergency. We do not have time to talk about it.
If you want.
I'd like to table it and hold a public hearing. That's mine. Everybody else, there's 4 other people on the board.
You got to amend this application too, I think, right? You're getting rid of the deck.
That's paperwork. It can be done in 20 minutes. You have a drawing in front of you that's stamped in that says what we asked to do. This board didn't even ask us to remove the deck. We didn't know what we were going to do with it.
I asked you at the last meeting
What we were going to do when we didn't know.
No trespass. Well, it should be even a thought. Some kid walks out there, falls up that deck and drowns. How you gonna feel?
Well, the way we feel is we want to get rid of it.
I would have had it down already, but that's just me.
I don't think it was possible for him.
It was not possible.
Yeah.
Now, what about the stuff you've already installed? Doesn't that take away the immediate emergency?
Well, we did not install it. It was done by Round Dune, but no, absolutely not. I mean, we had a cold front go through with small waves last night, and like 6-foot waves, and they eroded 60+ feet of beach and are washing against these things. You get a decent wave hit that it's gone in 10 minutes.
So you didn't do that project for them?
No, that was done by their in-house people.
No, I feel strongly about I do feel strongly about a public
I appreciate the way you feel, but I am gonna bang on the podium and tell you my clients are in an imminent risk, and this goes beyond feelings. This goes to action. I'm going to respectfully ask you to act.
Where's the state? I see you have your paperwork from the state, and you're very close on that.
We're going to have the state permit in a matter of days. I mean, you read the email; it's self-evident.
Right. No, I see that. I see that the state's
So, I mean, if we
gonna
hold a public hearing in 2 weeks, we can have this on for a vote at that time. But I really respect what you say, but I'd really like to hear from Robert Young. And I'd also like to hear from the adjoining property owners that are going to be possibly either damaged or maybe not damaged. We don't know. But some correspondence from Robert Young, I'd feel more comfortable with moving forward.
Is there a way?
This board controls its destiny. I don't. But I'm going to make my point emphatically. Emphatically, I will say to you, I disagree. You take on a great responsibility. Please understand, in my opinion, I'm not a lawyer, I'm a geologist. In my opinion, you take on a great responsibility. You have a written assurance from the DEC they're going to issue a permit. We're going to file this with the town of Southampton within the next couple of days, and they're obligated by town code to grant us a permit because we comply. And you heard the building inspector, the chief building inspector, tell you he thinks this is an imminent peril. And you want to wait a couple of weeks so you can hear from Robert Young, who is going to look at a couple aerial photos, and what's he going to tell you that you haven't heard already? I just don't find that. I professionally think that's irresponsible.
But Mike also said that they would be up against the structure.
And they are.
Well, not if you got sandbags and the fence there.
You want us to take the fence out?
Well, not quite yet, but
Your application isn't for the for the geocubes being up against the structure.
Sure it is. They're right up against the structure. Look right at it.
now in the same application, same permit, I'm just trying to think out of the box. Would you be opposed to repairing any damage that occurs east or west, or north and south?
If that's a condition of your permit, then we have to do it.
I think that's a thought too.
The condition in that prior 1997 permit had a monitoring program in it. I mean, the permittee had to submit a report, had to submit as-built surveys in terms of not just their property, but also neighboring properties. I don't see why that couldn't be made a condition here, which would address any impact adversely to neighbors.
So I agree with President Warner. None of us are coastal geologists. And I think that we need the benefit of a scientific expert to look at this. I also think that the neighbors need to be considered. The flanking erosion that is probable as a result of the placement of the geocubes needs to be considered. I think that long-term forecast is fair for the next couple weeks. I do not think it's irresponsible at all on behalf of this board. I think it's eminently responsible for us to be looking out for everyone in this town.
I walked underneath houses after Sandy, literally walked underneath houses, underneath gunite pools. They were in a lot worse shape than this place is right now. I understand that Mother Nature dictates what goes on. It's beyond my control and your control, but I think it would be prudent of us as a board to have a public hearing and to get as much information as we can. If at that time, on December 16th, we so deem we can put this application on for approval, it's 2 weeks. I think it's the appropriate thing to do for the people of our town, protecting their
Does it
reason.
have to be, can it be moved up? Does it
Yes.
have to be 2 weeks? Can this be earlier? Because, I mean, they're talking about an emergency situation, and the state looks like they're imminent on issuing a permit. I mean, is there a possibility to move that time frame up? Because if they're gonna, you know, if everybody's gonna get wheels in motion on things here, you at
Well-
least owe these people, I think, the earliest convenience on making a decision on what's going on here. There's a lot of things at play here.
We do have a meeting on the 10th, night meeting in Flanders. It would be not putting it in the Southampton Press, we'd have to put it in Newsday. It would cost the board $1,000 to put the hearing notice in there. I think if the board wants to go that avenue, it would shorten it up by almost a week. And
It depends, though, on the expert scientific testimony, and that expert is out of the country at this point.
Well,
So it depends.
But there's more than one expert in the world, and why my clients need to be held hostage to Dr. Young because he's got travel plans is beyond my ability to understand.
He's familiar with this area and is able to look at it and speak
Yes.
knowledgeably.
Nevertheless, we, over a holiday weekend, delivered to this board every scrap of information they asked
And
for.
we appreciate that.
And we deserve the same respect.
As did we make some phone calls and make some inquiries during the after the last meeting. So I think we've all done our work here.
But not to be held hostage as someone who's got travel plans. I'm sorry, this is an emergency, folks. This is not, I'll get back to you when I get back into town.
Yeah, but you don't know if the DEC will issue a permit tomorrow or a week from now. That's the whole thing. So
Doesn't
we're,
trump everything.
we're asking for basically 2 weeks.
I think I agree with Trustee Horowitz. I think we should expedite this in any way we could, no matter how we can do it. We got to put a stamp one way or another on this.
If you gotta go to Newsday, go to Newsday.
That's it.
I think if you're gonna get experts and engineers, I think get them down here. If you wanna get the public down here, get them down here, but I think you need to do that at the earliest possible point in time, because, look, you got all these wheels in motion on this FIM plan. You know, obviously, there's a lot of merit to the assault that we've been under by the North Atlantic for quite some time, and it looks like it could come to a head, but it's a triage situation. They're trying to keep their patient alive. We want to be mindful of the fact we're trying to defend a public access easement that's important to the economic engine of this community and the adjoining property owners. So I think that, you know, a public hearing is prudent, but I think we need to expedite this based on the actual situation at hand. So, I mean, whatever it is that we can do to get everybody around the table to figure out what makes the most sense to do here, I think we need to do that at the earliest convenience.
So you want to go for the 10th?
What about Robert Young?
Well, hopefully we get some correspondence back from him.
He would have to understand that this is an emergency
Yes.
situation.
I had a long conversation with him on Friday.
Well,
He understands what we're going through right
Okay,
here.
well,
So if you want to push it up to the 10th, which will be a week from today, hopefully we can have some information, and then we could have at least alert property owners, the adjoining property owners in the area and the people that use that beach, that what's going on, so that we can have a good conversation, a broader conversation than just with, the round dune people, which I feel sorry for, that they're in a tough situation. But I think it would be a good idea to hold a
I think
public
we need
hearing.
we need to have a conversation with the state of New York as well.
Yes.
And I think that's an important discussion.
And the feds.
And the feds. So I think everybody's got to get around the table here.
That's why I said when we reach out to Robert Young, we're going to be asking for a long and a short-term solution. So,
I'd agree with the 10th.
right.
Again, if you can't get Robert Young, I'm sure you can get
Okay.
somebody else.
all right, you want to push for the, we'll be okay
Please.
with
Is that,
the 10th?
let's do it as fast as possible.
All right, we'll put the public hearing on for the
All right, so
10th.
we need you have a motion to
Table.
table to the 10th?
Table to
I'll
the
make the
10th.
motion.
You're making the motion, Scott?
Yep.
Okay.
Whoever wants to make the motion, I'll make it, table it till the 10th, and whatever, if that's what the board,
And we'll pay the $1,000 to Newsday to have it
whatever it is.
properly
I'll let you
posted.
know how much it will be. I'll get an
Okay.
estimate.
All right,
We
thank
need a
you, Liz.
second on the
Second.
motion to table?
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All right.
Bill?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Scott, we need to go back to page 2, to
Yeah,
2019
well,
381.
I like to do the public portion because there are some
Oh,
people
okay.
here that would like to speak before, and then we'll go into the rest of it. Thank you, sir. Is there anybody here that would like to address the board in the public portion of our meeting? Kevin?
Thank you, Ed. Good afternoon, Board. Kevin McAllister. I'm president of Defend H2O. I think as a preamble, I'd like to take a brief minute just to share with you my background. While in the press, I'm often reported as an activist, an advocate, an environmentalist. I have serious scientific credentials. I shared with you my undergraduate work was in natural resources and biological sciences, marine. My master's is in coastal zone management. Much of that work was focused on coastal processes. I was employed by Palm Beach County for 12 years, excuse me. Much of that was in shoreline protection. I'm well trained and well experienced to speak to the issue. I'm here to address Round Dune, but I would like to speak to the larger context. Obviously, as we are grappling with the impacts at the inlet,
What was this?
public portion.
Public portion.
Public portion.
May I continue?
Yeah.
Is this something that we should specifically, at
we don't
the
know what
public
he's
hearing?
talking
Well, we've got a public hearing scheduled for the 10th. If it's going to be regarding that application, I would say please hold your comments until the 10th.
Why couldn't I return and augment those comments on the 10th?
For the sake of the record, I would prefer it, but you,
Okay, I'd like to proceed because, much of what I do is education. I've certainly spoke to the conditions and a long-term prospect of Dune Road, and I'd like to speak about FIM first and foremost. I've attended the meetings going back 2 years ago when they did basically the Corps did a roadshow as to describing their prescriptions for different reaches of the coastline. In this particular area, I found it curious that they reintroduced the concept of sand bypassing. As you may recall, I've spoken to this 15 years ago. There was a proposal for a sand bypassing system, and that can come in various forms from a roving dredge to a fixed pump house on the east side. Ultimately, that proposal was withdrawn. It disappeared. And now, while we talk about the condition of erosion along this stretch, obviously now we're reintroducing sand bypassing. We can't operate in silos. We've got to be talking to the larger context. And Ann, you brought this up, and I think it's imperative. The Corps, again, clearly has to describe what they have in mind for sand bypassing. I just heard that now we have emergency response navigational dredging. They're distinctive. Navigational dredging is not routine and regular and systematic sand bypassing where we're keeping some volume of sand on the western side, obviously with the influence of that inlet. The Army Corps with their sand proposal, something that came out of the meetings 2 years ago, after, I'll say, repeated inquiry, they acknowledged that they are getting out of the sand business in 30 years, that paying for this will fall onto local government, or the privates, the erosion control district. You're absolutely correct about the Mid-Atlantic average being 3 to 5 years. I've openly said the Sagaponic project has been a success. It's high-quality sand, and it's outlasted the average. But nevertheless, we're going to have to keep the system keep pumping sand to maintain. I've shared with you the projections of New York State. We've seen a 4-inch rise over 40 years. This is in part 79, excuse me, of their environmental conservation law. They have identified between 13 and 30 inches of rise over the next 40 inches. And I can provide you, actually I have provided you, and I'll give you that specifics to DEC's regulations. In simple terms, that means we haven't seen anything yet. We don't have a long-term plan for Dune Road, in my opinion. These are stopgap measures, ultimately pumping sand, and now we're entertaining shore hardening. I saw that the 97 permit, I would respectfully say, we didn't know in 97 what we know today, and particularly what the future holds for us. This is a slippery slope with the geotextiles. Mr. Tertullian described the interlocking of these bags, the containers, the cubes. This is fortification. This isn't necessarily being knocked out with one surge. There is an end scour effect if this becomes a prominent feature, meaning it's sticking out there, both on the east and west, but in particular to the west side. So it is responsible to include private property owners that are downdrift in the entire reach here that we are trying to manage to be part of this discussion. With respect to emergency response, I understand the situation, and I'm not here to say I want to see the Round Dune fall into the sea. That's not my interest. The notion of coastal retreat is a long-term prospect. It will take decades to execute. That's why we have to have these conversations, inclusive conversations, today. I urge the board, if in fact you arrive at a decision that this is a prudent permit, consider a performance bond to ensure that the impacts that could be felt, may be felt, question mark, as a result of this structure, that there is an ability to compensate and make whole. There's no question that that's needed. I will share with you East Hampton in their code for geotextile containers. They have a 6-month emergency response for placement of the structures. They allow a 3-month extension, but ultimately they are requiring that these be removed. My concern over the long term, why we talk about sand, the average lifespan, the ability to pay for this, when we get down the road, 10, 15 years, and we don't have the ability to pump sand for whatever reason, whether it be logistics, but because every community up and down the East Coast is dealing with the same thing, and relying on the Army Corps that has already stated they're getting out of the sand business, that we move into thinking where we ultimately memorialize these structures. So sand cubes today turn into a steel sheet pile tomorrow. Again, we have to have eyes wide open on your decision here. I respect and appreciate the short extension to deliberate, to have others speak to this, including myself. I will be back. And I appreciate the opportunity just in public comment to share some of these thoughts that, again, this is serious stuff. And we have to have a full conversation, and again, at the risk of belaboring the point, managing in silos, whether it be town board, trustees, Suffolk County, Army Corps, it's not going to get it done. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anybody else that would like to address the board in the...
That's why we wanted to get everybody around the table.
Yes, public portion? If not, I'd like to continue with the applications.
You want to finish with mine since I started?
Yes, please.
Boy, oh boy.
All right, so I did the cash in
81.
2019 381. It's a renewal.
All right.
It's a renewal. You all right? Jeffrey 2018 Family Trust Permit GP 000038. Reviewed at work session. I recommend that we renew this
I'll
permit.
second it. All in favor?
Aye.
I also have 2019-383 William Gutman Jr., 15 Bayside Avenue, East Quogue. This is another application ordering the Shinnecock Bay that we worked on at work session, which currently fits all Blue Book regulations. I recommend its approval at this point in time.
I'll second that one. All in favor?
Aye.
Do you want to do this?
Billy's up.
I'll do bills.
He left the room.
Yeah, trustee resolution 2019-384. Application for Dave Betts, 7 Helens Lane, North Sea, New York, Suffolk County, tax map 900-61-1-74, body of water, part of Fish Cove. We had discussed this at our work session and went over it. It's all compliant. I recommend this.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you, Bruce.
Renewal application, second, 88 Redwood Road, LLC, permit number FLD 00025, 88 Redwood Road, body of water, Saginaw Cove. We fully vented this at work session. I'd like to make a motion this goes through.
Second, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Trustee Resolution 2019-386, application to Collection House LLC, 8 John Street, Sag Harbor, Village of Sag Harbor, Saginaw Cove. We fully vented this at work session. I'd like to make a motion this goes through.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye. Application of 216, Trustee Resolution 2019-387, application of 216 Redwood Road LLC, 216 Redwood Road, Village of Sag Harbor, Saginaw Cove. We fully vented this at work session. I'll make a motion this goes through.
Second, all in favor?
Aye. Trustee Resolution 2019-388. This is for waterfowl hunting location expired or non-renewal of permits. This waterfowl hunting location permit expired as of August 1st, 2019, and a renewal application was not submitted to renew the permit for the 2019-2020 season on behalf of permit number 272, Jeremy Clint in the Peconic River. I'd like to
I'll second that.
ask for its approval for non-renewal.
All in favor? Aye.
Trustee Resolution 2019-389, application of Tommy Rosenfeld and Deborah Good Rosenfeld. I have a letter here from the agent. I've been advised that my client, Tom Rosenfeld's application to reconstruct his bulkhead is scheduled for resolution Monday, December 2nd. I respectfully request that this application be tabled for now. Mr. Rosenfeld would like to review your recommendations to his application and requires additional time to do so. I will contact your office once all his concerns have been addressed, so I'd like to table this resolution.
I'll
Table
second.
to December 16th, Trustee Walker?
I will
That's 2 weeks.
I will contact your office once all concerns are addressed.
We need to have a date to
date?
table.
Okay.
It could be the 10th, or we could
No,
do
no,
it on the 16th.
16th, that gives 2 weeks.
Okay.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Trustee resolution 2019-374, adopt the 2020 trustees' final operating budget. All in favor?
Aye.
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 Take a roll call vote.
Okay, President Warner,
Yes.
Secretary Treasurer Horowitz.
Yes.
Trustee Pell has left the room. Trustee Stafford.
Yes.
Trustee Welker.
Yes.
Okay, so we have a quorum and it passes.
Thank you. Trustee Resolution 2019-390, warrant 20 for 2019 for the sum of $8,262.77.
Yes, we had a manual check in the amount of $2,445.56 dated November 18th, which was made to the Bridgehampton National Bank for the payment of the trustee's credit card, so that needs to be mentioned in the warrant. Cold Spring Harbor Fish Hatchery, $3,162.50. InterScience, $1,420.60. Joseph R. Lombardo, $3,300. New York Title Abstract Service, $200. The Southampton Press, $120.81. Staples, $58.86 for a total of $8,262.77.
Thank you, Lisa.
We need a second.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye. Trustee Resolution 2019-391. This is authorized the opening of Mecox. I'll make a motion this goes through.
I'll second it. All in favor?
Aye.
Trustee Resolution 2019-392. Recall and amend Resolution 2019-77.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Page 12, please.
I'm getting there. Trustee Resolution 2019-393, authorized payment repair of Noyak Path and Old Sagar Road. We fully talked about this at work session. I make a motion this goes through.
I'll second that. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Trustee Resolution 2019-394, notice of adoption to amend Article 12 beach regulations in 4x4 driving. I recommend approval.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
That's to extend the area at Cold Spring
Correct.
by an additional 2,000.
1,700 feet. It was 300 feet, now it's 2,000 feet. So I think
And
it's,
it'll be available 24/7.
right, correct. I think it's a good thing, so thank you.
President Warner, we have two walk-ons for the board's consideration.
Okay. Remember which I have. The first walk-on is recall and amend the trustee resolution 2019-275, application for Dale R. Edwards Revocable Trust, 4447 Noyak Road, Noyak, New York, Suffolk County Tax Map 900-19-1-45, body of water, Upper Sag Harbor Cove.
This is to walk on.
Yep,
Second it.
all in favor?
Aye.
And on the underlying resolution to adopt.
I would like to see this adopted. And
Second.
yes, all in favor?
Aye.
All right. Notice of public hearing for Round Dune, Inc., 101 Dune Road, East Quogue, New York, Suffolk County Tax Map 900-385-2-14, body of water, Atlantic Ocean. This is to schedule, this is to,
We can walk it on and then amend it on the floor.
okay,
Second is Walker.
okay. All in favor?
On the walk on.
And then I'd like to amend it to read December 10th, 2019 at 7 o'clock.
Second it.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
And motion to adopt.
Motion to adopt
Second.
said. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Thank you.
Thank you.
Does anybody else have anything else they'd like to
Nope.
bring
I
up?
think we had quite the meeting.
All right,
I got one thing to bring up.
okay.
With repeated calls to the DEC about getting an emergency permit for Mecox. Have you heard back from her yet today?
She asked for some photos and evidence of flooding, so I sent that to her. Haven't heard since.
All right, I would like to just build onto that, I also called Sherry Aker at the DEC, asking her where our 10-year maintenance permit was. It was promised to us after we had, actually before we had adopted the MECOX management plan, and we have not heard anything, correct, James?
What a coincidence.
So,
I called too.
so, you know, it's one of these things that just really makes it more and more difficult for us to do our work in a timely fashion. You know, Mecox Bay is high, and with the overwash from the storm and the rain, it's going to be flooding the farm fields, and it's on Flying Point Road again. So if we had the 10-year permit in hand, we could just call up the contractor, and weather permitting and the environment, you know, and Mother Nature, you know, taking into consideration all the bad weather we've had, just to open it at a phone call. So
What is the status of the 10-year permit?
I have not received any correspondence back from the New York State DEC. James, do you know what the
She
latest?
sent an email today, actually, right?
Yeah, she said that they've received it and they're looking at it, and it sounds like they'll be in touch asking for more information.
Right.
Right.
That's what her email
I mean,
to the board was.
This is the same permit that we had gotten 10 years ago, or actually 12 years ago, and the previous 10 years before that. So nothing has changed in the application except for the extensive flooding and prolonged flooding which they have caused for the last 2 years and not allowing us to do our job properly.
She
So-
says our review of your application for a 10-year permit is progressing, and we expect to have comments back to you soon on the specifics of the additional information that will be necessary to complete our review. That's her response.
All right.
Okay?
Thank you, Scott.
You're welcome.
All right.
You gotta check the going after.
All right. So I think I would like to adjourn the meeting. All in favor?
Second that.
All right.